2024 is shaping up to be a massive, massive, massive year for Atlus. We went into 2024 expecting a lot, Persona 3 Reload and a new IP, Metaphor Refantazio, but all of a sudden, out of thin air, Atlus comes in hitting a dagger 3, announcing a new version of Shin Megami Tensei 5, Vengeance, where not only will there be an entire new story route for the player to go under, but also, the game will now be ported to other platforms. In an ever-expanding move of Atlus moving away from console exclusivity, which is what they used to be known for. And now, when we look at 2024, we have 3 major releases from Atlus, one of which has already come and gone. Persona 3 Reload, we have the quote-unquote Atlus Definitive Edition, pretty much, for Shin Megami Tensei 5, but also subsequent ports alongside it, with Vengeance. And we have an entire new IP with Metaphor Refantazio. This is a massive year, let alone for Atlus, for any game company out there. And as someone who likes to peer behind the veil of the video games industry to try and determine what possible routes or paths or routes, however you want to pronounce that word, and what possible trends may develop in the video games industry, if you want to look at the future of Atlus, I think 2024 is a really good one to look at. As Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, and now Metaphor Refantazio are all their own separate identities. Persona used to just be a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, but has blossomed into its own behemoth of a franchise, with its own unique identity and playstyle. Shin Megami Tensei 5 seems to be mixing things up, but it's still Shin Megami Tensei. And Metaphor Refantazio has taken other risks and trying to find its own identity, but if we want to peer behind the veil, I think the discussion will go way further than just simply which one will sell more. The newcomer onto the block, the ports, or the established IP that has a lot of notoriety behind it. I think it's a way more nuanced discussion if we want to determine what even maybe Persona 6 may look like. Because let's be fair here, let's establish some ground rules for this discussion. Each of these are their own separate IP and their own separate little entities that have their own separate, well, like I just said, identities, what makes them work and makes them tick. They all have a slightly different formula, but no one ever said that a game in the future could not borrow some particular aspect from one of these games. There's a lot of mechanics that in a way kind of feel just like Atlus mechanics that they will shape and augment to fit the given IP or the situation or whatever the game particularly calls for in that moment. Sure, the social link mechanic may be an intrinsic identity, an identifier for Persona, but Metaphor Refantazio does not have to just go without something like that, now does it? As it was shown in the trailer that there is some kind of reputation system where you augment your relationship with certain characters. This is what I'm talking about, where we can look at the trends, we can look at how each of these games does things, and how they do these things differently to one another, and we can analyze what works the best, and maybe get some idea as to what Atlus may want to get out of this year. Because I'm certain that they want all of these games to succeed, and I imagine they will to some degree. But also, I imagine Atlus wants to look at how the reception is to these games as to where they may want to go in the future. This is a great data year for Atlus, where they can provide 3 different playstyles, 3 different takes on certain mechanics or twists and variants, and see which one is received more. Or more well. Dude, one of these days I'm gonna get over this cold or sickness, whatever the hell I got, and be able to, you know, breathe and formulate words. I think there's a few things in particular that I'm really interested to see what Atlus picks up on out of these 3 games. Shin Megami Tensei 5's open world design, and Metaphor Refantazio's combat, specifically the real-time action that you can enable, well not necessarily enable, but participate in before going into the turn-based mode. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I think they've talked about this in an interview or a video or whatever, but I think it's also the trailer, where at the start of a fight in the overworld, if you see an enemy, you can just whack at them with your sword, kind of like how you sneak up on shadows in, say, Tartarus, or just in Persona in general, how you can like get that first hit in to gain advantage, but instead of gaining advantage, you do damage. And if you manage to kill the enemy with that real-time combat, then the enemy's dead, and you can just move on. But if they're more your speed, or at least a threat, you can do a little bit of damage and then transition to the classic turn-based combat. This is a really interesting idea in my opinion, that kind of seems like it does what I'm talking about in this video. It looked at what came before and says, well, this is an interesting idea, what can we do with this? Remember in Persona 5 Royal, where if you level up Ryuji, when you run into a shadow in Mementos, in the car, van, or whatever, if you wildly overlevel it, you just get the rewards. It doesn't force you to go in and just hit him with basic attacks and waste a whole bunch of time in a meaningless combat loop to where there's no stakes or whatever. It just says, okay, cool, you're done, enemy gone, defeated. I think this even works on like some enemies your level, just a chance. And it was a great way to farm. And it made Mementos with Ryuji feel way less tedious because you weren't just constantly going in and out of a battle transition to do like 2 attacks or 4 just to one-hit all the enemies. Just for them to do like 1 point of damage, if that. We can speed things along, make this more seamless. And while that worked well, in my opinion, in Reload, how could we make this more engaging and more fun? Well, instead of you just running into them with your Morgana car, why not have you participate in actual combat in the overworld, swing at them with your swords, maybe they die, maybe they don't. If they don't, you go into the turn-based combat. If they die, you move along. Like, that seems like a natural evolution of that style of looking at a mechanic from Reload, not Reload, Royal, looking at that idea and saying, how can we make this better? What works? What doesn't work? Or what can we fine-tune and make it even more endearing and engaging? Like, that's what I'm talking about here. As SMT5 is now brought to a more wider audience with multi-platform releases, how will people react to the more open world of SMT5 compared to, say, Tartarus, which is way more linear in its design, essentially composed of a bunch of corridors, just intermixed together. You have this more giant open world. How are players going to react to that? Will that non-linearity possibly fit in a style of a game like, say, Persona 6? Or maybe when we get to Metaphor Refantazio, maybe that level design and that zone design specifically may be more up the alley of what they want to go for. Or maybe they say, well, we can look at Tartarus and say, this kind of works more for what we want out of Persona 6, just maybe we can identify some aspects from the other games and bring them along. Like maybe we go with Tartarus or something along those lines of a more linear corridor section, or even the palaces of P5, if you want to go back there, and combine it with, say, the real-time combat introduction in Metaphor Refantazio. Or maybe bring along the conversations that you can have with the demons in Shin Megami Tensei 5. And I'm not even talking about the mechanic where you have to, like, negotiate to bring them into your party, which Persona 5 also had. I'm unfamiliar with Shin Megami Tensei 1 through 4, so I don't know if that mechanic was there originally. But again, this is what I'm talking about, where you can bring ideas from one IP to the other and make them fit depending upon how you implement them. And this is where 2024 for Atlus gets so interesting, because we're getting 3 data sets here. 3 ideas, 3 things Atlus is throwing at the wall to see what sticks. We have a remake, a definitive edition, and a whole new IP. What works? What doesn't work? What may work with a few changes here and there? All of these are coming with their own unique ideas and identities. That doesn't mean they all have to exist completely separately, or they can't learn from one another. And this is where brilliant games tend to blossom, in my opinion. One of the reasons I think Atlus is where they are currently, because they understand this idea. When you look at the Persona franchise going from 3 to 5, you can see them, and you play each of those games back to back, you can feel and see what they thought didn't work and what they thought worked, and what changes they believed would make the game better. Whether it comes from level design, Tartarus is a little bit too repetitive, so let's like condense it a little bit into these dungeons in Persona 4. Oh, they're a little bit too linear. Okay, how about we make these palaces that have their own unique identity and mechanics and visuals, and have you like navigate them as if you're going on a Phantom Thief journey, trying to steal treasure, an infiltration. It's a great idea, but what if we don't want to also just disregard the gameplay of old? Let's bring along Mementos. Oh, it didn't necessarily work that well in base P5, let's add some things to it. Some new collectibles, a new NPC, to augment the reward structure out of Mementos. Let's give Ryuji an ability to run over jabronis in Mementos, why not? Take what came before, learn from it to make it better in the future. This is why, if you ask me, in terms of what is the better game out of Persona, I would say the order goes 5, 4, 3. 5 being the best quote-unquote game to me, because they took the lessons from the past and made the game better. Not entirely, but mostly, in my opinion. And a lot of that has come to pass with Reload, where I think party composition and design and just combat overall is more interesting than ever before, because they took the lessons from the past and tried to make a better game out of them. And with Atlus trying to expand the horizons and spread their wings and try new IP and try new things, you don't want each of these IPs to become homogenous in terms of their overall structure, but preventing one IP from getting better because you refuse to allow it to borrow from another simply on some vague moral principle that each of these IP are inherently separate is delusional in my opinion, and I don't even think Atlus holds that opinion. As we talked about before with the shadow/demon interrogation/negotiation. If an idea works and is good, utilize it, run with it, try and make it better. And I believe Shin Megami Tensei 5 has done this one in the past as well, but the idea of a branching storyline, depending upon what route you want to take initially, with the OG path from the Switch version of Shin Megami Tensei 5, or the new Vengeance one, it's a really cool idea and a cool concept. Maybe a repeat playthrough gets a little bit tedious from here to there, but that remains to be seen. It's kind of similar in the vein. I think Shin Megami Tensei 3 did this as well in one of its versions, by the way. I think I read that somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's similar in vein to Persona 3 Portable with male MC or femc, where you got different social links, and the story overall was the same, but there's a few differences here and there. But with Shin Megami Tensei 5, they're seemingly leaning into those differences and giving you an entirely different story depending on which route you go. That's a really cool idea, and what if that works for the other franchises as well? I want to get my hands on it and play it and see how it flows, how it works, how it operates. Is it rough like sandpaper or greasy? Or slick like pig poo? Like, what is it? I want to see, I want to feel it, I want to get to know it. And there's a lot of aspects to Metaphor Refantazio just in terms of scale alone, judging from the world, but also the navigation around the world. Looks really cool, and they're throwing a whole bunch of ideas at the wall with Metaphor Refantazio. And I'm super looking forward to that. Metaphor Refantazio in a lot of ways looks as if Atlus has had a bunch of ideas for what they've wanted to do for a while, but they just don't work for Shin Megami Tensei or Persona. So, a new IP allows them to utilize and work off of these ideas. I love to see that. And I'm glad they're not just languishing with Shin Megami Tensei and Persona. I'm glad they're trying new IP. But maybe one of these new ideas that they have in Metaphor Refantazio could work really well in Persona or Shin Megami Tensei, like I talked about with that real-time combat to grind out weaker enemies. It's a really cool idea. And just like imagine, if you will, like a thought experiment where they could go with this mechanic in the future. Like if they give you multiple ways to attack and you can form combos in this like prelude to the turn-based combat, what if by doing a certain combo or fighting them in a certain way or utilizing environmental hazards to your advantage, you could give the enemy a certain type of resistance or weakness that they didn't have before. And you could like augment the fight like that. How cool would that be? You see what I'm saying? When you have all these different styles and you're throwing all these different things at the wall, we can really get into the weeds of it and see and just like imagine where these could go from here. Because I know Atlus is watching. Not this video, but like watching community reception to these games. They may not always hit entirely, but I feel that more often than not, way more often than not, each entry, you can tell they're actively trying to make it better than what came before. So yeah, that's why I'm excited for 2024. And not just 2024, where we can go from here. Because I can just imagine Persona 6 and what it could implement from these 3 games, or even Royal, that we'll look back on and say, oh, it got this idea from this, or this, or this. But it's trying something new and being different. That's a really cool idea. And I love looking ahead to stuff like that, you know? So here's hoping that Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance and Metaphor Refantazio hit, and that they're really good games, because the future's looking bright. Now, I'm gonna go try and get over this sickness. Wish me luck. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. Leave a comment down below with what game you were more looking forward to. Persona 3 Reload, Shin Megami Tensei 5, or Metaphor Refantazio. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.